What if the finish line of the American dream was never really there? Imagine spending 40 years working, saving, and planning, only to discover that retirement, the promise of rest after labor, has quietly slipped away. For decades, Americans believed in a simple path: work hard, buy a home, raise a family, and one day, retire with dignity. But beneath that promise, hidden forces have been reshaping reality. Pensions have all but vanished. Healthcare costs climb year after year. The stock market, the very foundation of most retirement accounts, can erase decades of savings in a single crash. Look closer, and the signs are everywhere. The neighbor in his 70s still working the night shift. The house on the corner sold after a medical bill piled too high. The quiet shame of an aging couple relying only on Social Security, barely enough to cover groceries, let alone a mortgage. The truth is unsettling: retirement, once considered secure, has become one of the riskiest stages of life. Data shows nearly half of Americans over 55 have no retirement savings at all. And even those who saved are finding their nest eggs are far smaller than they expected. But this isn't only about money. It's about independence, dignity, and whether a lifetime of labor leads to freedom or dependence. As we step into the life of one family, the Andersons, we begin to see the crisis unfold across generations. Their story, marked by sacrifice and survival, is not an outlier. It is America's hidden reality. And so the question lingers: if retirement is collapsing, what does that mean for every family chasing it? The street is quiet, an early winter evening in Ohio. A thin layer of frost clings to the edges of car windows. Inside a modest two-story home, the kitchen light glows faintly yellow. At the table sits Robert Anderson, 75 years old, his shoulders rounded as he scans a stack of envelopes. The table is worn, the edges scratched from decades of family dinners, school projects, and hurried breakfasts. But tonight, it feels different, more like a desk in an office of last resort. Bills spread out like a puzzle he can't solve. Robert was born in 1948, the son of a factory worker named Harold Anderson. Harold had worked at a tire plant his entire adult life. Every morning, before dawn, he laced his boots, grabbed his metal lunch pail, and disappeared into the rhythm of machines. When Harold retired in the late 1980s, a pension check began arriving each month. Steady. Reliable. Enough to keep food on the table and even allow trips to visit grandchildren. Robert, watching as a young man, thought his own life would follow that same arc. But the world had other plans. By the time Robert was in his 30s, pensions were fading. His employer replaced them with something called a 401k, a term most workers didn't fully understand. The glossy brochures promised freedom: invest wisely, and you could retire wealthier than your parents ever dreamed. What they didn't say was that the risk had shifted. The company no longer carried the responsibility. Now it was on Robert. Robert spent his life as an electrician. The pay was decent, the work steady enough to support his wife, Linda, and their two children, Mark and Emily. They bought this house in 1979, raised their kids in its narrow rooms, and believed the future would take care of itself. For years, Robert dutifully contributed to his 401k. But the markets had a cruel rhythm. The dot-com crash in 2000 slashed his savings. He recovered slowly, only to lose nearly a third of it again in 2008. By then, he was 60 years old, too close to retirement to make up the difference. The documentary camera doesn't dramatize his despair, it lingers instead on small details: the hesitation before he opens his latest statement, the tightening of his jaw as he scans the numbers, the sound of a refrigerator humming in the silence. Across America, Robert's story is not unique. By 2010, nearly two-thirds of households nearing retirement had less than $100,000 saved. To live for 20 years on that sum is impossible. Retirement became less a finish line and more a mirage. Linda, now 72, joins him at the table. She sets down 2 mugs of tea. Her hands shake slightly, not from age, but from arthritis. Prescription bottles line the counter. Their combined Social Security checks barely cover the mortgage, utilities, and medical bills. They never imagined they'd still be paying a mortgage this late in life, but refinancing after the 2008 crash stretched the debt further into their old age. Robert looks at her, his voice low. "I thought we'd be free by now." She doesn't answer. Instead, she flips through one of the envelopes, a medical bill for tests she had last month. The balance is more than their grocery budget for the entire month. Their daughter Emily visits on Sundays. She's 42, a schoolteacher, married with 2 kids of her own. She watches her parents carefully, noticing the way Robert avoids asking for help, the way Linda insists everything is fine. Emily knows the truth, though. She's the one who sometimes slips a few bills into her mother's purse, pretending it was forgotten change. Their son Mark, in his late 30s, works in logistics. His job is stable but demanding. He confides to Emily that between his own mortgage, student loans, and saving for his children's college, he feels like he's running on a treadmill that never slows. Retirement savings? That's for people richer than me, he jokes, though the laugh is thin. The Andersons' Sunday dinners are warm, filled with roast chicken and old family stories. Yet beneath the laughter is an unspoken current of worry. Everyone at the table feels it, the sense that the future doesn't stretch wide with possibilities, but narrows into questions no one can fully answer. For Robert, retirement was supposed to mean fishing trips, volunteer work, maybe travel. Instead, he takes odd jobs fixing wiring in neighbors' basements, pocketing $50 here and there. At 75, the work exhausts him, but stopping feels impossible. This generational squeeze isn't abstract, it's measurable. Economists call it the retirement crisis. Nearly 40% of retirees rely solely on Social Security, which averages around $1,800 a month. Rent, food, healthcare, all eat away at that limited sum. For families like the Andersons, dignity becomes a daily negotiation. The documentary pauses on a moment, Robert at the pharmacy, sliding his debit card for Linda's medication. The screen flashes, declined. He sighs, pulls out a credit card, and swipes again. Another small debt, added to the pile. Meanwhile, Emily wonders about her own future. Teachers in her district don't have pensions like her grandfather did. Her retirement plan is modest, tied to a volatile market. She contributes what she can, but between raising children and supporting aging parents, the math feels impossible. History explains how this happened. In the 1980s, corporations pushed responsibility away from themselves and onto individuals. 401(k)s replaced pensions, healthcare costs surged, wages stagnated, and life expectancy stretched longer. The system asked ordinary Americans to become investment managers, but most had neither the training nor the margin to succeed. Crashes like 2008 wiped out decades of careful saving in weeks. For the Andersons, those shifts translate into daily trade-offs: heat or groceries, medicine or car repair, pride or asking for help. The narrator's voice settles: retirement in America is no longer a guarantee. It is a gamble, one that millions are losing. The camera lingers on Robert as he folds the bills back into their envelopes. He pushes them aside, stands slowly, and walks to the window. Outside, the street is dark, porch lights flickering across modest homes. Somewhere, a neighbor's television glows. He wonders how many of them are quietly fighting the same battle. The scene closes not with drama, but with silence, the kind that hangs heavy when promises fade. Sunday dinner ends with dishes clinking in the sink, children running through the living room, and Robert slowly lowering himself into his worn recliner. He pretends to watch the football game on TV, but his eyes drift toward the clock on the wall. Time feels heavier these days. Emily lingers in the kitchen, rinsing plates alongside her mother. She doesn't say it out loud, but the weight of her parents' struggles presses against her chest. At 42, she can see her own future written in their lives. Emily Anderson, now Emily Carter since her marriage to David, teaches middle school English. She loves her students, the rhythm of classrooms filled with restless energy. But teaching, once a stable career, has changed. Her salary stretches thin against rising rent, childcare, and endless small expenses. Her retirement plan? A defined contribution account through the school district. Each paycheck, a small percentage disappears into a fund tied to the stock market. She tells herself it's progress, but when she checks the balance, the numbers barely move. Some months she skips contributions altogether to cover bills. David works as a paramedic, his shifts unpredictable, his body worn from years of lifting patients. The couple often joke that between her lesson plans and his late-night emergency calls, they run on borrowed energy. But beneath the jokes is a reality neither wants to face. They are part of a generation squeezed from both sides, supporting aging parents while raising young children. Sociologists call it the sandwich generation. Nearly 47% of Americans in their 40s and 50s support both a parent over 65 and at least one child. The Andersons are no exception. Emily buys groceries for her parents more often than they admit, while also saving for her own kids' future. Her daughter, Hannah, is 14. Her son, Lucas, is 10. College tuition looms like a storm cloud. The average cost of a four-year public university now exceeds $20,000 a year, even for in-state students. Private colleges run twice that. Emily and David tuck away a little in a $529 savings plan, but it's a drop in an ocean. One evening, after the children are asleep, Emily sits at the dining table with her laptop open. A spreadsheet glows on the screen. She calculates monthly income, expenses, savings goals. The numbers don't add up. Retirement savings feel like an afterthought, overshadowed by immediate needs. She leans back, rubbing her temples. "We're never going to catch up," she whispers. David, pouring himself a late coffee, shrugs. "Most people don't." That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Statistics back him up. Nearly half of Americans aged 35 to 54 have no retirement savings at all. For those who do, the median balance is just $60,000, far below what experts say is needed. Emily thinks of her grandfather, Harold, who lived comfortably on his pension. His retirement years were secure, predictable. She thinks of her father, Robert, whose 401k evaporated twice in market crashes. And now, her own reality, juggling three financial fronts at once, her parents' stability, her children's future, and her own retirement. Generations stack like dominoes, each leaning harder on the next. The documentary camera shifts to a grocery store. Emily pushes a cart down narrow aisles, comparing prices of cereal boxes. She glances at her phone, an alert from her retirement account. The market has dropped again. A week's worth of contributions gone in an instant. She closes the notification without opening it. The box of cereal goes back on the shelf. Meanwhile, her brother Mark lives across town. At 38, he and his wife, Jessica, bought a small home in the suburbs. Their mortgage consumes nearly a third of their income. Mark works in logistics, coordinating shipments for a regional distribution company. His job is steady, but like millions of middle-class workers, his wages have barely kept pace with inflation. On paper, Mark should be saving aggressively for retirement. In reality, daycare costs for their toddler, combined with student loan payments, drain his paycheck. When asked about retirement, he shrugs. That's decades away. I'm just trying to make it through this month. His response echoes a national truth. Nearly 63% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, including more than half of households earning over $100,000. Retirement planning feels like a luxury reserved for someone else. The camera lingers on Mark one night as he pays bills online. The glow of the screen reflects in his tired eyes. He scrolls past an ad for early retirement strategies, shaking his head. He's not thinking about retiring early, he's thinking about surviving long enough to retire at all. Meanwhile, Robert's health declines quietly. Emily notices the shortness of his breath when he climbs the stairs. Linda insists he's fine, but Emily can see the worry etched in her mother's face. Medical costs grow. Even with Medicare, copays and uncovered treatments pile up. Emily begins to wonder, will her parents need to move in with her one day? How will she afford it if they do? This is not just one family's fear. Across the United States, multi-generational households are on the rise. In 1971, only 7% of adults lived with parents and children under one roof. Today, it's nearly 20%, a sign that retirement insecurity doesn't just affect the elderly, but ripples through entire families. The Andersons gather again on Thanksgiving. The table is crowded with turkey, stuffing, laughter, and stories. Yet even as plates pass and wine glasses clink, money hovers like a ghost no one wants to name. Robert makes a quiet toast, to family, and to getting through, no matter what. Everyone nods, smiles, and takes a sip. Later that night, after guests leave, Emily stands in the kitchen alone. She looks at the empty plates, the half-eaten pie, the silence returning to the house. She thinks about the future, not decades ahead, but next month, next year. She thinks about her father's tired face, her mother's arthritis, her brother's strained voice on the phone. The narrator's voice enters, steady. For families like the Andersons, retirement isn't an age. It's a question without an answer. Every generation asks it. Few find certainty. The screen fades on Emily at the kitchen window, staring into the darkness outside. The reflection of her own face overlays the night. And with that, the story shifts, not toward solutions, but deeper into the fabric of an American crisis that grows quietly, year after year. The glow of a hallway nightlight casts long shadows across the Carter household. Upstairs, Hannah scrolls on her phone beneath the covers, earbuds tucked in, while her younger brother Lucas sleeps in the next room. To them, retirement isn't a word they think about. They're teenagers, caught up in exams, friends, and weekend plans. Yet unknowingly, the system shaping their parents and grandparents will one day shape them too. Hannah is 14, thoughtful and restless. She sees more than her parents realize. She notices the way Emily lingers over bills, the sighs David lets slip when a medical statement arrives. She hears arguments muffled behind the bedroom door, not about love, but about money. One evening at dinner, Hannah asks casually, "Why does Grandpa still work?" "He's old." The table falls silent. Robert chuckles softly, "Buying time. Keeps me moving, kiddo." But Emily and David exchange a look. Hannah may be young, but she can sense the cracks. Lucas, at 10, is more direct. "When I grow up, I'm gonna be rich so I don't have to worry about money." Everyone laughs, but beneath it there's an ache. It's the kind of statement a child shouldn't feel the need to make. Sociologists note that financial stress doesn't just impact adults, it seeps into children. Studies show that kids in financially insecure households are more likely to experience anxiety, lower academic performance, and even health issues. In the Anderson-Carter family, this stress hums like background noise. At school, Hannah's friends talk about college dreams. Some already tour campuses, their parents confident about tuition savings. Hannah, meanwhile, overhears her mother whispering to David, maybe community college first, then transfer later. It's all we can afford. The cost of higher education has tripled since the 1980s, far outpacing wages. For families like the Carters, saving for college means sacrificing retirement contributions. It becomes a trade-off, the future of the children versus the future of the parents. Emily feels the tension every time she opens her retirement account. The balance creeps upward, then stalls, always too small compared to the charts financial advisors show. She closes the tab quickly, as if not looking will soften the reality. Meanwhile, Robert's health grows more fragile. His shortness of breath worsens, his joints stiffen. Linda insists they're managing, but Emily knows better. Medicare covers much, but not everything. Dental work, hearing aids, and certain medications still carve holes in their budget. One afternoon, Emily drives her father to a cardiologist. The waiting room is filled with elderly patients clutching folders of paperwork. A sign on the wall reads, "Payment due at time of service." Robert leans close to his daughter. "How do people afford this?" She doesn't answer. Back at school, Hannah writes an essay for her English class about the American dream. She describes hard work, success, and independence, but her conclusion feels hesitant. "I think the American dream is harder than it used to be," she writes. Her teacher, reading the paper later, underlines the sentence with a faint pencil mark. Generational shifts become visible in small ways. Harold Anderson, Robert's father, never once questioned whether retirement was secure. Robert entered adulthood assuming it was, only to discover that the burden had shifted to him. Emily juggles 3 responsibilities at once: her parents, her kids, herself, and wonders if she'll ever have enough. And Hannah, still in high school, already questions the stability of the system she's supposed to believe in. Thanksgiving passes, then Christmas. At the Carter home, lights twinkle on the tree, presents are modest, and laughter fills the room. But when the children head upstairs to play, Emily quietly slips Robert an envelope with $200 inside. Just to help with the medical bills. He shakes his head, pride bristling. "We'll manage." She presses it into his hand anyway. "Dad, please." He finally nods, folding it into his pocket without another word. Across America, similar moments unfold daily, adult children supporting parents who once supported them. A cycle of dependency grows, not out of laziness, but out of necessity. The system strains, and families become the fallback safety net. Mark, meanwhile, calls Emily one evening. His toddler has been sick, and the hospital bill arrived. Insurance covered some, but not all. "I had to put the rest on a credit card." His voice is weary. "How are we supposed to save for retirement when this keeps happening?" Emily doesn't have an answer. She only listens, the silence heavy on the line. The documentary camera moves through these homes quietly, capturing unpaid bills tucked in drawers, pill bottles stacked in neat rows, children's drawings taped to refrigerators. The contrast is stark, innocence and worry sharing the same space. Lucas asks his grandfather one day, "What does retirement mean?" Robert pauses. "It means, after working a long time, you finally get to rest." The boy frowns. "But you still work." Robert forces a smile. "Sometimes it doesn't go the way you planned." The narrator enters softly. Retirement was once a promise, now it is a possibility, and for many, a fading one. Each generation carries more weight, each trade-off sharper than the last. Emily tucks her children into bed, then returns to her laptop. Another spreadsheet, another attempt to stretch numbers further than they'll go. David walks past, squeezes her shoulder, and whispers, "We'll figure it out." But his voice carries no certainty. Outside, the neighborhood is quiet. Porch lights flicker, snow gathers along driveways. Behind every door, similar conversations unfold, parents calculating, children listening, futures uncertain. The screen lingers on Hannah staring out her bedroom window, the glow of her phone lighting her face. She texts a friend, "Do you ever worry about money?" The typing bubble appears, then disappears. No reply comes. Winter presses hard on the Carter family. Snow piles against the curb, sidewalks freeze, and the world outside feels brittle. Inside, Robert coughs more often, his breath shallow after even small tasks. Linda insists he rest, but old habits keep him moving, fixing a cabinet hinge, shoveling half the driveway before David rushes out to stop him. One morning, the phone rings. It's Robert's doctor, requesting more tests after a concerning scan. Emily drives her father to the hospital, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. Robert tries to lighten the mood. "You know, I've had more scans than birthday cakes in the past year." Emily forces a smile, but her eyes betray her worry. The test results arrive, early-stage congestive heart failure. Manageable with treatment, but requiring medication, lifestyle changes, and regular monitoring. Robert listens carefully, nodding, but later confides to Emily, "I'm not sure how we'll afford all this." Medical costs are the quiet storm of retirement. Even with Medicare, out-of-pocket expenses average nearly $6,500 a year for seniors. For families living paycheck to paycheck, that number feels insurmountable. Emily sits with Linda at the kitchen table that night. Papers spread between them, insurance statements, pharmacy receipts, budget notes scribbled in pencil. Linda's hands tremble slightly as she flips through the pages. "We always thought Social Security and savings would be enough. But it's not. It's just not." Emily feels the pull of two worlds, her children upstairs, her parents downstairs in need. It's the sandwich generation dilemma in real time, stretched thin between raising kids and caring for aging parents. Millions across America live this same reality, often silently. Meanwhile, David has been working overtime. His own exhaustion shows in the deep lines on his face, but he rarely complains. One night, he admits, "I'm scared, Em. What happens if one of us gets sick too?" She doesn't answer. Hannah notices more than they think. She watches her mother's weary expressions, hears whispered arguments about bills, and quietly decides to start saving her babysitting money. For college, she says when asked, but part of her wonders if she'll need it for something else. Lucas, curious and unfiltered, asks Robert one afternoon, "Are you dying?" The question hangs heavy. Robert kneels slowly, catching his breath before answering. "Not today, buddy. I'm just a little broken, that's all." Lucas hugs him, small arms around a frame that feels friendlier than before. At the grocery store, Linda begins cutting corners, generic brands, fewer fresh items, skipping extras. She jokes to the cashier, "We're on the senior diet." But in the car, she sighs. Pride keeps her from asking Emily for more help, though she knows it may be inevitable. The narrator enters, "Healthcare is the hidden cost of aging in America. Families expect to slow down in retirement. Instead, they speed up, working harder, stretching thinner, giving more. What was once a season of rest becomes a season of survival." Emily's brother Mark calls again. He's been following the news, proposals in Washington about raising the retirement age, debates about Social Security's future. If they push it higher, what happens to Dad? He can barely stand long shifts now. Emily replies softly, "We just get through it. One day at a time." The strain grows heavier in small, relentless ways. The kids need new shoes, the car requires repairs, Linda's glasses break, and Robert's medication costs spike because it's not fully covered. Each moment chips away at their savings, their patience, their sense of control. One evening, Hannah overhears her parents talking. David says quietly, "Maybe we should pull from the retirement fund." Emily shakes her head. "If we do that now, we'll have nothing later." Hannah lies awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the word nothing echoing in her mind. Church friends drop off meals after Robert's hospital visits. Neighbors offer rides. The community tries to soften the blow, but Emily knows these are temporary fixes. The long road ahead is theirs to walk. Then, in early spring, Robert collapses while walking to the mailbox. Linda screams, Emily rushes out, and an ambulance siren fills the quiet suburban street. The camera follows the flashing lights as they pull away, neighbors watching silently from their porches. Hours later, Robert lies in a hospital bed, pale but awake. The doctor explains, a flare-up of his condition, treatable but serious. "He'll need more consistent care," the doctor says gently. "It might be time to consider home assistance." Home assistance. Two words that sound supportive, but to Emily and Linda, they translate to costs, thousands of dollars a month that the family doesn't have. Emily swallows hard. "We'll figure something out." Back home, Linda confides in her daughter. "We thought retirement would be peaceful. We worked our whole lives for it. But it feels like we're back at square one, worrying about money every single day." Emily hugs her mother, but inside, she feels the same despair. The narrator closes the chapter. This is the hidden truth of retirement in America. The promise of rest is overshadowed by the weight of illness, debt, and uncertainty. Families don't plan for this, yet more and more are living it. The screen lingers on Robert's frail hands resting on the hospital blanket. Hannah's voice overlays, reading from her essay draft. The American dream says if you work hard, you'll be safe in the end. But I wonder, what if that's just a story we tell ourselves? The hospital room smells faintly of antiseptic, the beeping machines punctuating each second like a metronome. Robert drifts in and out of sleep, his face softer now, almost childlike. Linda sits at his bedside, clutching his hand, whispering memories from their early years, summer road trips, their first house, the day Emily was born. She speaks as if anchoring him to the present by reminding him of the past. Emily and David stand quietly in the corner, exchanging glances. They both hear the doctor's words echoing, "He'll need more consistent care." The phrase refuses to leave their minds. Later, in the waiting room, Linda lowers her voice. "They say we might need in-home nursing. But the cost, it's more than our mortgage ever was. I don't know how we'll manage." Emily squeezes her mother's hand. "We'll figure it out." Yet even as she says it, her chest tightens. Across America, families like the Carters face the same dilemma. Long-term care costs an average of $4,500 to $5,000 per month for home services, double that for nursing facilities. Few households are prepared. Insurance rarely covers it fully. Retirement accounts shrink under the weight, and adult children are pulled deeper into debt. That evening, Emily sits at her kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through care agency websites. David leans against the counter, arms folded. "We can't afford this," he says flatly. "We're already stretched thin." Emily nods, her eyes filling. "What's the alternative?" "Quit my job and take care of him full-time." Silence hangs heavy. Both know that choice would sink their own finances. Upstairs, Hannah listens from the hallway. She's old enough to understand what money problems sound like. Later in her journal, she writes, "Grown-ups always say we'll be okay. But if that's true, why do they cry when they think no one's watching?" The next morning, Robert insists on going home. He dislikes hospitals, the way strangers adjust his bed and poke him with needles. "I want to sit in my own chair, drink my coffee from my own cup," he says. Emily arranges the discharge, though she feels the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. Back at the house, adjustments begin. Linda clears a space in the living room for a reclining chair that's easier on Robert's back. Emily researches safety rails for the bathroom. Neighbors stop by with casseroles, each visit both comforting and quietly pitiful. But costs start to bleed through quickly. A part-time nurse for just 3 days a week adds nearly $1,200 to their monthly expenses. Emily and David shuffle bills, delaying car maintenance, postponing Hannah's new laptop for school. At dinner one evening, David breaks. His voice sharper than usual, "We can't keep living like this. Our savings are gone. The credit cards are maxed. Something has to give." Emily stares at her plate. Linda, sitting silently beside Robert, lowers her fork and whispers, "We never meant to be a burden." Robert bristles, his pride surfacing. "You're not a burden," Emily says firmly. But inside, the tension gnaws. The narrator threads through, the United States faces an unprecedented demographic shift. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over 65. The question is not just who will care for them, but who can afford to. One Sunday afternoon, Emily drives her parents to church. The congregation prays for Robert's recovery, hands resting gently on his shoulders. Afterward, Pastor Green pulls Emily aside. "If you ever need financial counseling or community volunteers, let us know." Emily nods politely, but shame lingers. She doesn't want charity. She wants stability. Meanwhile, Hannah grows more withdrawn. She skips a sleepover with friends, telling her mother she needs to help around the house. Lucas, sensing the tension, begins acting out at school, talking back to teachers, refusing homework. His teacher calls Emily, her voice kind but firm, "He's struggling, Mrs. Carter. He's carrying something heavy." The stress begins to unravel the fabric of daily life. One evening, Robert sits with Emily on the porch. His voice is quiet, almost apologetic. "I hate seeing you like this. You're burning the candle at both ends because of me." Emily shakes her head, tears brimming. "You took care of me my whole life. This is what family does." But in the silence that follows, both wonder how long they can keep it up. Financial pressure creeps closer. A letter arrives, the credit card minimum payment has doubled. Another envelope warns of late fees on the mortgage. David rubs his temples, muttering, "We're drowning." Linda suggests selling the house, moving into a smaller place, but Robert refuses. "This is our home. I built the shelves, the porch, the garden. I'll leave here feet first." His words carry finality. Emily knows arguing won't change his mind. The weight shifts to her shoulders again. That week, she meets with a financial advisor at the community center. The advisor, middle-aged with kind eyes, flips through their statements. "You're not alone," he says. "Most families aren't prepared for this stage. The system assumes you'll either have wealth, or you'll rely on Medicaid once everything's gone." Emily asks quietly, "So, we have to lose almost everything before we qualify for help?" He nods. "That's the reality." Emily leaves the office numb, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the parking lot. She sits in the car, staring at the steering wheel, and whispers, "How is this the American dream?" At home, Hannah sits beside Robert as he dozes in his chair. She sketches quietly in her notebook, drawings of their house, of her grandfather's weathered hands, of her family gathered around the dinner table. She doesn't say it aloud, but she knows these are moments she may not have forever. The narrator closes the chapter. Families dream of golden years, of peace and reward after decades of labor. But for millions, the reality is compromise, sacrifice, and loss. The cost of growing old has outpaced the promises that once defined the American dream. The screen lingers on Emily at the kitchen table, head in her hands, the glow of unpaid bills lighting her face. The hum of the refrigerator fills the silence. The first "for sale" sign goes up in spring. Not on the Carters' lawn, but across the street, an older couple, friends of Robert and Linda, forced to downsize after medical bills drained their retirement. Emily watches from her window as movers carry boxes to the truck, the husband standing with his arms crossed, his wife dabbing her eyes. The sight plants a seed of dread. A week later, that same conversation arrives at the Carter household. David lays out the numbers on the kitchen table, his voice flat, almost mechanical. "We can't keep juggling this. The credit cards are maxed, my overtime is gone, and the retirement fund is almost empty. We have to sell something. Either the car, or, he doesn't finish." The silence says enough. Robert sits stiffly in his chair, jaw set. "We're not selling this house," he declares. Linda looks at him gently. "Maybe we should, Bob. Maybe it's time." His eyes flash. "This home is all we have left that's ours. Everything else has been taken." The generational weight of ownership in America is heavy. A home isn't just walls and wood, it's identity, pride, proof of a life's work. To sell feels like erasing decades of struggle. That night, Emily and David argue quietly in their bedroom. "We can't keep drowning just to protect their pride," David whispers. Emily stares at the ceiling. "It's not just pride. It's their whole life. If we take this away, what do they have left?" Meanwhile, Hannah overhears again. She presses her hands against her ears, but the muffled words still reach her. In her journal she writes, "I don't think adults realize we hear everything. I wish they knew how heavy secrets sound." The bills pile up. Prescription refills. Medical equipment rental. Utility costs rising with summer heat. Lucas complains the house is too hot, but Emily has turned the air conditioning down to save money. One morning, Robert shuffles into the kitchen to find Linda crying quietly over an electricity bill. He sits down slowly, takes her hand, and says, "We made it through harder times. We'll make it through this." She nods, but in her eyes is a flicker of doubt. The narrator interjects, "Nearly 40% of retired households in America rely solely on Social Security. With average monthly checks around $1,800, there's little margin for emergencies. For families like the Carters, a single illness tips the balance from survival to collapse." By midsummer, the Carter family makes a decision: they sell David's truck. It fetches less than they hoped, but it buys them a few months of breathing room. Still, the loss stings. David's truck was more than transport, it was the tool he used for side jobs, the symbol of his independence. Now he takes the bus to work, shoulders slumped as he waits at dawn. At dinner one evening, Hannah asks innocently, "Will we ever go on vacation again?" The table falls silent. Finally, Emily answers softly, "Maybe someday." Hannah doesn't press further. She just nods and looks down at her plate. Lucas, too young to filter his thoughts, blurts out, "Why don't we just sell Grandpa's chair? Then we can buy ice cream again." The adults force a laugh, but Linda feels tears prick her eyes. Emily starts exploring government programs, but the maze of forms, phone calls, and eligibility requirements feels endless. She spends hours on hold, only to hear, "I'm sorry, but you don't qualify unless your income drops below." She hangs up, defeated. One afternoon, Emily meets with her friend Sarah, a neighbor who went through something similar with her parents. Sarah speaks plainly, "We lost almost everything before Medicaid stepped in. You have to hit rock bottom before the system catches you." Emily shakes her head. "So the only safety net comes after you've fallen?" Sarah nods grimly. The emotional toll deepens. David withdraws, working long shifts and speaking little at home. Emily feels isolated, carrying the invisible weight of decision-making. Linda becomes quieter, ashamed of the strain she's placed on her daughter. And Robert, once the steady anchor, begins drifting further into frailty, his hands trembling, his steps uncertain. The children feel it too. Hannah begins skipping lunch at school, saving her allowance instead. Lucas starts hoarding small toys in his backpack, muttering, "Just in case." Then comes the hardest conversation yet. One evening, Emily sits with her parents at the kitchen table, voice unsteady. "Mom, Dad, we might need to consider assisted living." Robert's eyes narrow. "No. Absolutely not." Emily swallows. "It might be safer," he cuts her off. "This is my home. I'll die here." The camera lingers on Emily's face, caught between duty and desperation. The narrator flows in, the American retirement dream promised dignity, stability, and peace. But for millions, those promises unravel into impossible choices, between financial survival and personal dignity, between security for children and care for parents. By late summer, the Carter family sells their small boat, a relic of better days. The sale brings in just enough to cover medical bills for another month. Linda watches the buyers tow it away, her hand resting on Robert's arm. He looks away, his jaw clenched, as if refusing to acknowledge the loss. That night, Emily sits alone on the porch, staring at the dark street. Fireflies flicker in the distance. She whispers, "How much more can we lose before there's nothing left?" Inside, Hannah finishes her latest journal entry. "They always talk about what we can't afford. But I wonder, what if the real thing we can't afford is hope?" The Carter household begins to feel like a pressure cooker. The air is thick with unspoken words, arguments simmering just below the surface. Bills pile in unopened envelopes on the kitchen counter, Robert's medication bottles line the shelves like a constant reminder of fragility, and every creak of the house feels louder than before. Emily moves like a shadow between roles, mother, daughter, caretaker, employee. Her smile is stretched thin, her voice softer, her patience shorter. David notices but says little. When he does, it often comes out sharp. "You're never here anymore," he mutters one night as she folds laundry at midnight. Emily snaps back, "Where else am I supposed to be? I'm holding this family together." The silence that follows feels colder than any winter draft. Marriage under strain is not uncommon. Studies show nearly half of caregivers for aging parents report serious conflict in their marriages. The stress is invisible but corrosive, eating away at intimacy, communication, and trust. Hannah senses it most. She lingers at the edges of rooms, listening, her own teenage worries eclipsed by the weight of her family's crisis. In her journal she writes, "Home doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels like everyone is breaking apart, one piece at a time." Robert, meanwhile, retreats further inward. His once booming laugh has quieted. He spends hours staring out the window, watching children ride bikes down the street, as if trying to remember a simpler time. Linda hovers close, her own health declining under the weight of stress, though she hides it well. She doesn't want to become another problem for her daughter. One afternoon, Emily comes home from work to find Robert on the floor. Panic floods her as she kneels beside him, calling his name. He's conscious but weak, his words slurred. The ambulance comes again, lights flashing down their quiet street. Neighbors peek from windows, whispers spreading, the Carters are struggling. At the hospital, the doctor's tone is blunt. His condition is worsening. You need to prepare for more frequent episodes. Emily nods numbly. She's lost count of how many times she's heard the phrase, prepare for bills, prepare for decline, prepare for loss. Back home, the cracks widen. David voices what Emily fears: we can't do this anymore. We're sinking, Em. We need to think about ourselves, too. About Hannah and Lucas. About our own future. His words are practical, but they cut deep. Emily fires back, so what do you want me to do? Abandon them? The argument spirals, raw and unfiltered. Hannah hears from her bedroom, clutching her pillow as tears slip down her face. Linda, sitting by Robert's bedside, whispers to him through her own tears, I never thought it would be like this. We worked so hard. We planned. Why does it feel like we failed? Robert squeezes her hand weakly, but says nothing. The narrator enters softly. This is the hidden weight of retirement in America. The numbers tell one story: debt, costs, income shortfalls. But behind each statistic are families unraveling, marriages strained, children carrying burdens they should never know. Emily begins losing sleep. She lies awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Robert's labored breathing in the next room. At work, she struggles to focus, her boss pulling her aside to ask if everything is okay. Fine, she lies, though nothing feels fine. David too grows more distant. He spends longer hours at work, not just for overtime but to avoid the heaviness at home. When he is there, the silence between him and Emily grows longer, the space in their bed wider. Hannah, desperate to help, takes on babysitting jobs around the neighborhood. She hides the cash in an envelope under her mattress. One night she hands it to Emily. For Grandpa's medicine, she says softly. Emily's heart breaks, tears spilling as she hugs her daughter tight. It's not your job, she whispers. But Hannah knows, sometimes children take on jobs that should never be theirs. Lucas, confused and restless, begins acting out more at school. One day, the principal calls Emily in. He got into a fight, the principal explains gently. Lucas sits in the chair beside her, arms crossed. When Emily asks why, Lucas blurts, they said Grandpa's dying and we're poor. I told them to shut up. His small voice cracks with anger and shame. The weight of dignity and poverty presses hardest in moments like these. Children repeating what adults whisper behind closed doors, truths too heavy for their age. One evening, Emily and Linda sit together after everyone else has gone to bed. The kitchen is dim, the only light a weak glow from the stove clock. Linda says softly, maybe we should apply for Medicaid. Maybe it's time. Emily shakes her head, voice breaking. That means losing everything, Mom. The house, the savings, it all has to be gone first. Linda sighs. Maybe that's the only way. The narrator weaves in, the American system of care is built on a paradox. Families must lose nearly everything before the safety net appears. By then, the cost is not just financial, but emotional, trust fractured, relationships strained, hope diminished. By autumn, the Carter home feels less like a sanctuary and more like a battleground of survival. Arguments flare, silences deepen, children retreat, and Robert's health continues its slow decline. In her journal, Hannah writes, we used to laugh at dinner. Now we just count bills. The camera lingers on the family around the dinner table. No one speaks. Forks scrape plates, the ticking clock fills the silence. Robert clears his throat, but his voice is too weak to break through. Emily looks at her family, her eyes tired, her face lined with stress. The narrator closes softly, when the American retirement dream collapses, it doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It unravels slowly, in bills, in arguments, in silence. And the families caught in it are left asking the same question: how much more can we endure? The first frost arrives early that year. Cold air seeps through the Carter home, settling into the walls like an unwelcome guest. Robert's cough grows worse, each fit rattling his chest, leaving him breathless. Linda fetches water, rubs his back, whispers, "Breathe, Bob, just breathe." But her own hands tremble now, veins swollen, fingers stiff with arthritis she hasn't admitted to anyone. One morning, Emily notices Linda struggling to open a jar of jam. Her mother smiles, brushing it off, but the truth is clear: her strength is fading too. Later, Emily finds pill bottles tucked in a drawer, prescriptions Linda had hidden. Blood pressure. Pain management. Anxiety. Emily confronts her gently. Linda sighs. "I didn't want to add more to your plate." The words pierce deeper than intended. The quiet collapse of caregivers often goes unseen. National surveys show that over 40% of family caregivers experience serious health decline while caring for aging parents. They sacrifice silently until their own bodies give way. Meanwhile, Robert's latest hospital visit confirms what Emily already knows: his condition is progressing. The doctor's tone is firm. He needs near-constant supervision. Falls, infections, heart episodes, each one could be dangerous. Emily nods, her stomach twisting. At the dinner table, the topic returns: assisted living. Robert slams his fist lightly on the table, his voice shaky but fierce. "I said no. I'll die in this house. That's final." Linda stares at her plate, torn between her husband's pride and her daughter's desperation. Emily's voice cracks. "Dad, it's not safe anymore." He glares, the room filling with tension so thick even Lucas goes silent. After dinner, Hannah finds her mother crying in the laundry room. "Why can't Grandpa understand?" Hannah asks quietly. Emily hugs her tightly, whispering, "Because sometimes letting go feels worse than holding on." Bills continue to tighten their grip. The medical debt now outweighs what's left of their savings. David suggests selling the house again, his voice tired. Robert refuses again. The cycle repeats, like waves crashing against a cliff, eroding everything slowly. The narrator steps in: home is more than shelter in America. It is memory, identity, the proof of a life's worth. But when that very symbol becomes the obstacle to survival, families fracture under the weight of impossible choices. Emily's job performance slips. She misses deadlines, forgets meetings. Her boss calls her in. "We value you, but your focus is gone. Take some time if you need it." Emily forces a nod, knowing time off means less income. She feels the walls closing in, failing at work, failing at home, stretched too thin to stand tall anywhere. Hannah begins skipping after-school clubs, too embarrassed to explain she can't afford the fees anymore. Instead, she comes straight home, helping her grandmother cook, helping her brother with homework, helping her mother by simply being quiet. Her journal becomes her only outlet. "Sometimes I feel older than my mom. Sometimes I feel like it's my job to hold everyone together." Lucas, restless and confused, lashes out more. He tells a classmate his family is going broke. When Emily hears this, her heart cracks. She never wanted her children to carry the shame of scarcity. In late November, Robert collapses again, this time in the bathroom. Linda screams for Emily, who rushes in to find him unconscious on the tile. The ambulance comes, sirens cutting through the frozen night. At the hospital, the doctor's words are colder than the air outside. "This can't continue. You need to make a decision. He requires either full-time professional care or a facility." The phrase "make a decision" echoes like a verdict. Emily feels her chest tighten. Back home, she sits with David at the table, unpaid bills stacked high between them. David's voice is steady but heavy. If we keep going like this, we'll lose everything. The house, the savings, the kids' future. We can't do both, we can't save your parents and ourselves. Emily stares at him, her throat dry. So what do we choose? The screen holds on her face, torn between duty to the past and responsibility to the future. Meanwhile, Linda begins quietly packing a box, photographs, Robert's old tools, her mother's china. She doesn't say it out loud, but Emily knows what it means. Linda is preparing for the unthinkable, leaving the home they built. The narrator's voice overlays, this is the cost hidden in plain sight. Families do not only lose money. They lose homes, history, pride. They are forced to choose between honoring memory and surviving reality. And no choice feels like the right one. One night, Hannah asks Emily directly. Are we going to lose the house? Emily hesitates, then answers honestly. Maybe. Hannah nods slowly, as if she already knew. Later in her journal, she writes, I thought homes were forever. I didn't know they could disappear like people do. The part closes with Robert sitting by the window, staring out at the first snowfall. His voice is faint but firm. This house is my life. Without it, I'm nothing. The camera lingers on his profile, lined and weary, as snow drifts down outside. The December wind bites harder this year. The Carter's old furnace groans at night, struggling to keep the house warm. Every creak in the wood, every draft through the windows, feels like a reminder that time is running out. Robert sits in his armchair, blanket over his knees, eyes half closed. He looks smaller now, his once broad shoulders shrunken beneath the fabric. Linda sits nearby, knitting quietly, but the needles slip more often from her fingers. Silence fills the room, heavy and strained, until Emily breaks it. Dad, she says softly, we need to talk about what comes next. Robert opens his eyes, sharp with defiance. What comes next is I live here until I die. We've been through this. Emily's throat tightens. But your falls, the hospital bills, Mom's health, we can't keep going like this. It's tearing all of us apart. Robert looks away, his jaw tightening. Linda sets her knitting down, her voice wavering. Bob, maybe it's time we face what's happening. He snaps, louder than before. No. This house is all I have left. If you take me out of it, you may as well bury me. The room goes silent again, but the words hang like smoke that won't clear. The holidays pass with little cheer. Gifts are modest, handwritten letters, knitted scarves, small things meant more for comfort than joy. Hannah watches her friends post pictures online of ski trips, new clothes, big family gatherings. She scrolls quietly, shutting off the screen before anyone sees the tears forming in her eyes. Lucas blurts at dinner one night, why can't we be normal? Why do we always have to be broke? The words cut Emily like glass. She stares at her son, then at her father, then at the stack of bills nearby. No one answers. By January, the bills are no longer a stack, they're a mountain. Creditors call daily. The mortgage company sends a notice, 3 months behind. Emily and David look at the paper in silence. The house is slipping. They meet with a financial counselor at a local nonprofit, a middle-aged woman named Karen who has seen too many families like theirs. She explains plainly, you're at a crossroads. Either you sell the house and pay down the debts, or the bank takes it. If that happens, you'll lose everything and get nothing back. Emily feels her chest constrict. David leans forward, his voice edged with frustration. So our choices are lose it ourselves, or let someone else take it from us. Karen nods. That's the truth. But remember, millions of families face this every year. Foreclosures, short sales, it's not just numbers. It's lives. At home, Emily brings up the meeting. Robert grows furious. His face flushes, his hands shaking as he yells, "This is my house. You can't just sell it like it's some old car." Linda tries to soothe him, but her own voice cracks. "Bob, please, we're drowning." Robert slams his hand on the armrest, then coughs violently, his body folding in on itself. Emily rushes to him, terrified, but he waves her off, gasping, "Don't, take my home." The narrator weaves in, for generations, the home has symbolized stability in America. A promise of permanence, security, identity. Yet when that very promise becomes the chain that drags families under, the line between pride and survival blurs. And often, survival comes at a cost too heavy to bear. Meanwhile, Linda's decline becomes harder to ignore. One afternoon, she collapses in the kitchen, clutching her chest. Emily and David rush her to the ER. It's stress, the doctor explains, compounded by high blood pressure and exhaustion. When Linda returns home, she moves slower, her breath shorter. Emily begins managing two fragile lives at once, and her own strength frays. Late at night, she stares at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes bloodshot, cheeks hollow. She whispers to herself, "I can't do this anymore." David grows impatient. "We're going to lose everything if we don't act. I love your dad, but this is killing us. We need to put him in a home, sell this place, and start over. For the kids. For us." Emily looks at him, torn in half. "He'll never forgive me. And Mom, she'll break." David's voice hardens. "If we do nothing, our kids will be the ones to break." Hannah overhears this conversation. That night, she writes in her journal, "Adults think kids don't understand. But I do. I know we're losing the house. I know Grandpa's sick. I just wish someone would tell me the truth." Lucas, meanwhile, begins acting out more at school, talking back to teachers, picking fights. His counselor calls Emily in. He's angry, she explains. He feels powerless. He's carrying more than any child should. Emily listens, guilt pressing into her chest like a weight. By February, foreclosure papers arrive. They are no longer warnings, but legal action. The clock is ticking. Emily sits with Linda in the living room. The house feels colder, emptier, as if it already knows what's coming. Emily whispers, "Mom. I can't save it. I've tried everything. I can't." Linda's eyes glisten with tears, but she nods slowly. "Maybe it's time. Maybe the house isn't what matters. Maybe it's us." For the first time, Linda says what Robert cannot. That night, Emily tells Robert. His face collapses. He doesn't shout this time, he weeps. Shoulders shaking, voice breaking. "I worked my whole life for this. What was it for, if not this house? If not this family staying here?" Emily kneels beside him, tears streaming. "It was for us, Dad. And we're still here. That's what matters." But even as she says it, she isn't sure she believes it. The screen holds on Robert's face, lined with grief, as the sound of a ticking clock grows louder in the background. March arrives with gray skies and restless winds. The Carter's mailbox becomes a place of dread. Each envelope feels heavier than the last, final notices, foreclosure deadlines, medical bills stamped in red. The house that once held so much warmth now carries a quiet tension in every corner. Robert sits by the living room window most days, staring at the yard he once mowed every Saturday, the trees he planted decades ago. His body weakens, but his stubbornness does not. Each time Emily approaches him about the sale, his reply is the same, over my dead body. Linda, friendlier than before, tries to reason gently. Bob, we can't keep fighting. The house doesn't keep us alive. It's just walls. He shakes his head, eyes watery. It's more than walls, Lynn. It's our life. Our proof we mattered. Emily spends her evenings on the phone with lawyers, banks, social workers. Every call ends the same way, numbers that don't add up, programs with endless waiting lists, options that are no options at all. One evening, after another call with the mortgage company, Emily drops the phone on the table and whispers, "We've run out of time." David leans against the counter, exhausted. "We need to choose, keep fighting for a house that's already gone, or fight for ourselves." The children overhear again. Lucas storms off, slamming his door. Hannah lingers in the hallway, listening silently, her face pale. Later she writes, "The house feels like a ghost already. Everyone's fighting, but it's like the walls have already decided." The breaking point comes late one night. Robert wakes coughing violently, gasping for air. Linda screams for Emily. They rush him to the hospital, where the doctor delivers the words Emily has dreaded: his condition is critical. He needs round-the-clock care, now. This can't wait. Emily closes her eyes, the sound of the machines beeping around her. She knows what this means. She has to do what her father has feared most. Back home, she breaks down at the kitchen table, head in her hands. David sits beside her. It's not your fault. You've done everything. But this is bigger than us." Emily whispers through tears, "How do I tell him?" The next morning, she gathers her parents in the living room. Robert sits slumped, pale, oxygen tank beside him. Linda sits close, holding his hand. Emily kneels in front of them. "Dad. Mom. I've spoken to the doctors, the bank, everyone. We can't keep you here. You need care we can't give. And the house is being taken. We have no choice." Robert's eyes flash with pain. His voice cracks. "This house is me, Emily. You don't understand. If I leave it, I'm gone." Emily takes his hand. "No, Dad. You're not the house. You're my father. You're Hannah's grandfather. You're Linda's husband. You're more than these walls." Silence hangs, broken only by the hiss of the oxygen machine. For the first time, Robert doesn't argue. He simply looks away, tears slipping down his cheeks. The narrator cuts in. When the immovable force of memory collides with the unstoppable tide of reality, families face decisions that scar them forever. Pride gives way to survival. Homes give way to hospitals. And the American promise of retirement dignity collapses into the cruel math of debt and decline. A week later, movers arrive. Boxes line the hallway. Hannah hugs each room goodbye in her own quiet way, whispering to the walls. Lucas refuses to help, sitting on the porch with his arms crossed, muttering, "This isn't fair." Linda tries to hold it together, folding linens into a box, but her body shakes. Emily holds her mother close. "We'll be okay," she whispers, though she doesn't believe it herself. The day Robert leaves the house, he pauses at the doorway, hand on the frame. His shoulders shake as he whispers, "Goodbye." Emily supports him down the steps, his oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. The house, once full of laughter, music, and life, stands stripped and silent. Empty rooms echo as the last boxes are carried out. The family relocates Robert and Linda to a modest assisted living facility on the edge of town. It smells faintly of antiseptic and lavender air freshener. Staff move with professional efficiency, smiles stretched thin by long hours. Robert's room is small, just a bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window. He stares out at the parking lot, silent. Emily places family photos on the dresser, but he barely looks at them. Linda adjusts his blanket and whispers, "We'll make it feel like home." Robert shakes his head softly. Home is gone. Back at the Carters' new rental house, things feel unfamiliar. The walls are bare, the space smaller. Hannah sets up her room quietly, placing her journal on the windowsill. Lucas slams his backpack in the corner, muttering, "It's not the same." Emily and David collapse onto the couch, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The silence between them is heavy, but beneath it lies relief. They survived the impossible decision. Yet the cost feels immeasurable. The narrator returns. Every year in America, thousands of families are uprooted by the hidden costs of aging, healthcare, and debt. They do not simply lose houses. They lose identity, history, belonging. And in that loss lies the unspoken truth of the retirement crisis: dignity is not guaranteed, even after a lifetime of work. The screen lingers on Robert, sitting by his new window, staring out at a world that feels smaller than the one he left. His breathing is slow, his shoulders slumped. In his lap rests a faded photo of the house, his house, that he refuses to let go of. The assisted living facility hums with a steady rhythm, nurses walking briskly, carts rolling down hallways, the distant buzz of televisions left on in quiet rooms. For Robert Carter, the days blur together. He sits in his chair by the window, a thin blanket over his legs, watching cars pull in and out of the lot. Emily visits almost every day. She brings fresh fruit, new books, and photographs of Hannah and Lucas, though Robert rarely looks at them. One afternoon she says, "Dad, the kids miss you." His eyes stay fixed on the glass. "I miss the house." The words slice through Emily. She sits in silence, wishing she could give him what he wants, knowing she never can. Linda adjusts to the facility better than Robert, at least outwardly. She chats with the nurses, joins the occasional craft activity, even walks slowly with a neighbor down the hallway. But Emily notices the sadness in her eyes. Late one evening, after Robert drifts to sleep, Linda whispers, "I promised him we'd never end up here. And now here we are." Emily takes her hand. "Mom, you didn't fail him. You kept him alive this long. You kept us all together." But Linda shakes her head, looking smaller than she ever has. The children struggle in different ways. Hannah visits her grandparents and smiles politely, but later writes in her journal, "Grandpa doesn't smile anymore. It's like he's already halfway gone. I wonder if he blames us." Lucas refuses to go most days. When Emily pushes, he snaps, "What's the point?" He just sits there. It's not him anymore. His anger hides something deeper, fear of seeing his grandfather's decline. At school, Lucas gets into another fight, this time over a cruel comment from a classmate, "Your family's poor. Bet your grandpa's in a dumpy old home." Lucas swung before he thought. Emily is called in. The counselor tells her, he's carrying too much for a boy his age. He needs stability, structure, maybe therapy. Emily nods, guilt pressing in like a vice. But therapy costs money they don't have. Meanwhile, Robert's health unravels quickly. Pneumonia sets in, then a fall in the hallway leaves him bruised and shaken. The doctor explains gently, "He's nearing the end. You should prepare." Emily's breath catches. She calls David, then Hannah and Lucas, and finally Linda. They gather at Robert's bedside, the beeping machines soft in the background. Robert looks at each of them, his voice a rasp. "I wanted more time, in the house. I wanted to die there. Emily's tears fall freely. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. He grips her hand weakly. Don't blame yourself. You did what you had to. I couldn't let go. Linda leans in, her own tears slipping. We built a life, Bob. The house was just the shell. The life is right here. For a moment, the old warmth flickers in his eyes. He whispers, then promise me, remember the life, not the walls. The narrator overlays softly, the greatest loss in America's retirement crisis is not just financial. It is the erosion of identity, of the places and promises that anchor a life. Yet even as walls fall away, the essence of family endures, though often scarred, reshaped, forced to carry lessons written in grief. Days later, Robert slips further. He spends more time asleep than awake. Emily sits by his side, reading aloud from his favorite book, though she knows he barely hears her. Hannah quietly places a drawing on the nightstand, a sketch of their old house, with the words, "We love you," scrawled beneath. Lucas finally visits again. He stands stiffly at the door before stepping inside. When he sees his grandfather so frail, his anger dissolves. He whispers, "I'm sorry, Grandpa," then breaks down in tears, something Emily hasn't seen in years. Robert opens his eyes briefly, manages a faint smile, and places a trembling hand on Lucas's arm. It is a fleeting moment, but one that anchors itself in the boy's heart. The facility itself tells its own quiet story. Rows of residents in wheelchairs line the hallways, some staring blankly, others murmuring memories no one else can hear. A staff nurse, weary after a double shift, confides softly to Emily one night, "Families always think they've failed. But you haven't. You brought him here because you loved him, not because you didn't." Emily nods, but her chest still feels hollow. As spring arrives, Robert grows weaker. Emily juggles work, the kids, bills, and daily visits. The strain etches itself into her face. She no longer has the energy to argue with David when he worries about their own finances. Instead, she whispers, "Let's just get through this." Linda spends every night in a chair beside Robert, refusing to leave his side. Emily worries about her, but Linda insists, "Where he goes, I go." The family lives in suspended time, every phone call, every shift in Robert's breathing, every quiet goodbye layered with the fear it may be the last. The narrator cuts in again, "This is the unspoken face of the retirement crisis. Families stretched until they fracture, children absorbing burdens beyond their years, spouses breaking under invisible weight. The system promises care but delivers compromise. And love itself becomes a battleground between memory and survival." One late April evening, the family gathers again. Robert sleeps, his breathing shallow. Emily holds his hand, Linda strokes his hair, Hannah leans against her mother's shoulder, Lucas watches silently from the corner. The camera lingers on this tableau, for generations bound together, not by walls or possessions, but by the fragile thread of love in the face of loss. The screen fades slowly to black, leaving only the sound of Robert's breathing, unsteady, fragile, fading. The morning light filters weakly through the blinds of Robert's small room. The air is quiet, the usual sounds of the facility muted, as if even the building itself knows. Emily arrives with coffee in hand, her steps slow, her eyes already brimming. She finds Linda at Robert's side, head bowed, lips moving in prayer. Hannah sits in the corner sketching quietly. Lucas leans against the wall, staring at the floor. Robert lies still, his breaths shallow, each one a fragile thread. His skin has thinned, his frame sunken into the mattress. Yet there's a peace in his face, a softening of the stubborn lines that once carried defiance. The doctor comes in gently, nods to Emily. "It's time. Gather close." Emily kneels, holding Robert's hand. Linda clasps the other, whispering, "I'm here, Bob. I'm not leaving." Hannah sets her sketchbook aside and presses her small hand on his arm. Lucas steps forward, hesitation in his eyes, but finally takes his grandfather's wrist in both hands. Robert opens his eyes one last time. They flicker between each of them, then rest on Emily. His voice is barely a breath. "Thank you, for keeping us together." Emily bends close. "I love you, Dad." A faint smile touches his lips. Then, slowly, the rise and fall of his chest stops. The room holds still, as if the world itself pauses. Linda lowers her head onto his shoulder, sobbing quietly. Emily weeps openly, holding onto his hand as though refusing to let go. Hannah buries her face in her mother's side. Lucas stares hard, fists clenched, until finally the tears break free. The funeral is modest. A small chapel, a scattering of neighbors, old co-workers, and distant relatives. The air smells faintly of lilies, the hymns sung softly by trembling voices. Emily speaks at the podium, her voice quivering. "My father taught me that a home is more than wood and brick. It's the laughter, the struggles, the love inside it. Even when we lost the house, he reminded me, we didn't lose each other." Her words echo in the chapel, weaving between the pews, sinking into those listening. Afterward, Hannah places her sketch, a drawing of the old house, with all of them smiling in front of it, on top of Robert's casket. Lucas lingers a few steps behind, but before leaving, he whispers, "Goodbye, Grandpa." In the weeks that follow, the family moves slowly through their grief. The rental house still feels unfamiliar, but it begins to soften as life fills it. Hannah tapes more drawings to her walls. Lucas plays basketball in the driveway, his laughter returning in bursts. Linda lives with them now, moving carefully but finding comfort in her grandchildren's company. At night, Emily sometimes lies awake, wondering if she made the right choices. The guilt still tugs at her, sharp and unrelenting. David holds her hand and whispers, "You saved him the only way you could. You carried us all." The narrator steps in. Robert Carter's story is not unique. Across America, families are forced to navigate impossible choices: medical care or mortgages, dignity or debt, survival or memory. The retirement crisis is not an abstract statistic. It lives in kitchens, in hospital rooms, in the tears of children watching their grandparents fade. It is the silent unraveling of a promise once believed secure. Hannah, in her journal, writes one final entry about her grandfather: "He thought the house was his life. But I think we were. And I think maybe, just maybe, he knew that in the end." Lucas tells a friend at school, "My grandpa was tough. He didn't want to leave his house. But he taught me family is more important than pride." For the first time in months, his words carry pride instead of anger. Linda, though fragile, finds moments of light again. One afternoon she tells Emily, "He's still with us. Every story we tell, every memory we hold, that's the real home." Emily nods, tears in her eyes but a faint smile breaking through. The film slows, showing faded photographs of Robert, a young man holding baby Emily, a father hammering nails into the frame of the house, a grandfather teaching Lucas how to throw a ball. The images blur into each other, then fade into the present, the family gathered around a simple dinner table, smaller than before, but together. The American dream promised security after a lifetime of work. But for too many, that dream unravels into debt, decline, and loss. The Carter's story reveals what numbers cannot, that behind every foreclosure notice and medical bill lies a family struggling to preserve love against a system that too often forgets them. And yet, even in loss, even in grief, the truth endures: home is not a building. Home is the people we carry with us. The echoes of the Carter family remain, Robert's stubborn love, Emily's quiet strength, Hannah's hope, Lucas's fragile resilience, Linda's devotion. One story among millions, yet each detail carries the weight of a nation's silent crisis. America is facing a reckoning. For decades, families were told that hard work would guarantee stability, that a lifetime of effort would secure a peaceful retirement. But the promise has frayed. Rising costs, shrinking pensions, fragile healthcare, these are not isolated failures, they are fractures in the foundation. And when the foundation cracks, it is not only numbers that collapse. It is lives, homes, memories. Images of quiet suburban streets fill the screen, for sale signs leaning in front yards, elderly faces lined with worry, children watching their grandparents fade. The Carters lost their house, but not their bond. Others are not so fortunate. For them, the system demands sacrifices too great to measure. This is the hidden truth of the American retirement dream. It does not vanish in a single moment, but unravels piece by piece, family by family. The last image returns to Hannah's drawing, the old Carter house, sketched in pencil, glowing with laughter inside. The frame holds for a moment, then fades into silence. Home was never wood and brick. It was, and always will be, each other. The screen stays black. No music. Just silence.